Hello there, and welcome back to the Action Window with me, Action Johnny. Today's video is going to be a little different from what's come before, as we'll be diving into the lore and setting behind Darktide to take a closer look at the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Lovely. So it looks like Darktide is shaping up to be a pretty hyped release, not just from within the Tide and 40k communities, but also the wider gaming community as a whole. If this hype train translates to game sales, it'll mean we'll be getting an influx of new players that might not have ever been introduced to the Warhammer 40,000 universe. And that simply won't do. A massive part of why I'm so unreasonably excited for this game is the love and care taken with the setting and all the childish joy that playing inside it evokes. I personally couldn't imagine enjoying Darktide to its maximum potential without that context. So if you're brand spanking new to 40k and the channel, stick around because in today's content offering we'll be learning all about the Imperium of Man, the galaxy-spanning empire home to the planet of Atoma Prime where the events of Darktide take place. As always, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you enjoy the content, for it aids my course greatly. And it's just quite a nice thing to do, isn't it? When you boot up Darktide for the first time, you're going to be introduced to Darktide's narrative. You are a reject, a convict serving out a sentence on a penal colony/world who has been scooped up by the Imperium's Holy Inquisition. Rather than living out the rest of your days in a miserable prison somewhere, the Inquisition informs you that your lives are now in their custody and you'll be spending the rest of your likely short existence bound to its service. Great! You are to be deployed upon the world of Atoma Prime, crown jewel of the Mobian domain, an important sector of imperial space that creates and provides enormous quantities of resources for the wider Imperium. Pretty cool, right? Well, yes, I hear you say, but what the hell does any of that mean?
That, detective, is the right question.
40k at this point is an absolutely vast setting, nearly 30 years old, and to try and explain everything about it in one go would just be an information overload. Instead, I'm going to attempt to create a more broad overview of the key components of the setting without going into too much detail about any one aspect of it. In my opinion, there are four main cornerstones to the setting of 40k. On one side, we have the Emperor and the Imperium of Man, and on the other, we have the Warp and the Ruinous Powers. For part one of this series, we'll be taking a look at the God Emperor of Mankind and the Imperium of Man. So now, without further ado, if you'll excuse me, I need to change into my storytime voice. And so it is that it must begin with a man, for it is impossible to talk about the Imperium of Man and thus the setting itself without first introducing the one behind it all, the God Emperor of Mankind. Once upon a time in the 40k galaxy, many thousands of years ago, the Emperor walked the earth as a man of transcendent, unparalleled power to shape the future of humanity as he saw fit, but a man nonetheless. After the events of the Horus Heresy, the most destructive civil war the Imperium has ever seen left his body broken beyond repair. He was interred into the golden throne of Terra, upon which he has existed in a deathless state for 10,000 years. To quote one of the most infamous passages about him ever penned to paper, he is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and the master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass, writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the Imperium, for whom 1,000 souls die every day, for whom blood is drunk and flesh eaten. Human blood and human flesh, the stuff of which the Imperium is made. Now, it is important to note that when it comes to describing the Emperor, the sources describing him almost always use metaphor, allegory, and symbolism rather than stating outright fact. This is a deliberate device of the setting, meant to cast him in the shadow of mysticism while also adding plausible doubt to the story surrounding him. With the Emperor, you never really know what is true and what is not, and that's very much intentional. That being said, the sacrifice of 1,000 souls daily is indeed a thing. While he does not literally sit there chowing down on human flesh and drinking Bloody Marys made from actual blood, the body and souls of these sacrifices are consumed so that he may continue to live, or maybe it's better to say, not die. The purpose of the daily sacrifice of souls is as a power source, for the Emperor is not idle upon the Golden Throne. The God Emperor of mankind is, as well as many other things, the most powerful psyker to have ever existed in the 40k universe. His incredible mind is dedicated solely towards the vital tasks required to make sure the Imperium of man does not falter and fail. Chief amongst these is guiding the light of the Astronomicon, the giant psychic beacon used to guide the Imperium's countless spacefaring vessels through the warp. Only he has the strength of will to handle such immense energy and direct it across the galaxy, and without the Emperor's constant vigil, warp travel would be impossible, and the Imperium would wither and die. So now we have an idea of who the Emperor is, we can turn our attention to his empire, the Imperium of Man. At its core lies Holy Terra, throne world of the Imperium and the birthplace of humanity. With the Emperor existing in his current, deathless state, it falls to the High Lords of Terra to interpret his will and rule in his name as they see fit. These High Lords of Terra are the highest office of the Imperium, and are appointed from amongst the most powerful and influential organizations that constitute the government of the Imperium. The umbrella term for these organizations is the Adeptus Terra, also known as the Priesthood of Earth. Rather than being one single gargantuan bureaucratic office, the Adeptus Terra is the collective name for a group of supremely powerful institutions that oversee the day-to-day running of the Imperium. In fact, calling these governmental bodies, offices, or institutions doesn't really do them justice in describing the extent of their importance, their reach, and their influence. They are the metaphorical pillars on which the continuance of the Imperium is built upon, and each of them is a powerful faction within their own right. The greatest and most significant of these institutions are as follows. The Adeptus Administratum, the administrative and bureaucratic division of the Adeptus Terra. This is by far the largest department of the Adeptus Terra, consisting of untold billions of clerks, scribes, and administrative staff, constantly working to manage the Imperium at every level, from assembling war fleets to levying taxes. Its duties are vast and manifold, as it is comprised of innumerable divisions and departments, the most noteworthy of which are the Imperial Fleet, the Imperial Tithe, the Departamento Munitorum, the Navis Nobilite, and the Imperial Guard, or Astra Militarum, to name but a few. The Adeptus Telepathica, the organization responsible for the supply and training of psychers. Human psychers are a form of mutant that exhibit the ability to use psychic powers. These powers are drawn from and fueled by the warp. The role of psychers within the Imperium is a conflicted one. On one hand, they are essential to the continued functionality of the Imperium, and yet, left unchecked, they represent a potential danger that can spell doom for entire worlds. Thus it is that the black ships of the Adeptus Telepathica scour the length and breadth of the Imperium for psychers. The strongest and most in control of these individuals may go on to serve in some of the highest and most vital roles within the Imperium. The weakest and most unstable are used as little more than fuel, for the institutions of Terra eternally hunger for the soul energy of psychers. The Adeptus Astronomica. These are the keepers and the maintainers of the Astronomicon, the great psychic beacon which allows the Imperium's many ships to chart and navigate the stars. This great galactic lighthouse is powered by the efforts of thousands of psychers, an effort that will inevitably claim their lives. This sacrifice is as necessary as it is tragic, for without the light of the Astronomicon, the Imperium's many worlds would descend into darkness, cut off from Terra, and left to fend for themselves against the myriad horrors of the galaxy. The Adeptus Arbites. The brutal police force of the Imperium, they are overseers and enforcers of imperial law, each one acting as judge, jury, and executioner in an empire where failure and incompetence are crimes of the highest order. As such, they are rightly feared and an ever-present reminder for the average imperial citizen of the consequences of dereliction and sedition. the Adeptus Custodes. Known as the League of Demigods amongst many other titles, they are the guardians of the Imperial Palace and the Golden Throne, and personal bodyguards of the Emperor himself. Each one is a unique masterpiece of gene-wrought perfection, and they are considered the greatest of mankind's warriors. The Adeptus Astartes. These are the Space Marines, the Emperor's Angels of Death. They are a fighting force of genetically modified and highly trained elite warriors. Organized independently into thousands of individual chapters, they spend a lifetime of duty plying the stars, bringing doom to the enemies of mankind. Although superior in every aspect of war when compared to a regular soldier, there are far too few of them to form the main fighting force of the Imperium. Instead, they are entrusted with the most dangerous and demanding of military actions, the success of which can decide the outcome of entire war zones. While not an exhaustive list, these are the most noteworthy institutions of the Adeptus Terra when it comes to understanding how the Imperium functions. They are akin to great houses or feudal nobility, risen above the masses of ordinary citizens by their duty to the throne. A duty that, above all things, is a sacred one. The Imperium does not tolerate failure, and the consequences of failing in one's duty are viewed as treasonous and sometimes even heretical. Within the structures of the Imperium of Man, power and duty are bound together as one and the same. As well as the Adeptus Terra and all it encapsulates, there are three other great powers I need to briefly mention that exist within the hierarchies of the Imperium. I won't explore these in this video, for each one deserves its own, but considering their essentiality, it would be remiss of me to leave them out. They are, in no particular order, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the priesthood of Mars and the faction of the Imperium responsible for maintenance and development of the Imperium's technology, and the seekers of its lost wonders. The Adeptus Monasterium, or the Ecclesiarchy, the state church of the Imperium and administrators of the imperial cult, the only sanctioned religion of the Imperium. And finally, the Inquisition, an immensely influential and secretive institution with near unlimited reach, tasked with rooting out, investigating, and eliminating the great threats to mankind's continued dominance of the galaxy, both from without and within the Imperium. They exist outside of the regular Imperial power structures and answer only to the Emperor and themselves. They're also our rejects masters in Darktide, so expect to see a lore video on this faction in the not too distant future. Okay, that's gonna be quite enough epic Warhammer voice for one video. What do you think, gang? Did you like that? Good, because there's a whole second part coming down the line. In that video, I'll be taking a look at the 5 stellar realms of the Imperium, the nature of the warp, the navigators of the Navis Nobilite and the role they perform for the Imperium, how interstellar communication works, and finally, applying all this information to the Mobian domain of Darktide setting, so we've got an actual bit of context for all this knowledge I've just dumped on you. That's going to be it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.